During our honeymoon, I discovered that my husband had secretly booked himself and his mother in business class while giving me just an economy ticket. When I found out, I confronted him in the lounge, making sure everyone around us could hear. I'm 32 years old, and my husband Van, who is 36, and I recently got married. We've been together for 4 years and engaged for the past 8 months. I met him when I was 29 while working as a manager at a bar. He was a regular customer, and we started chatting one night. Initially, I turned down his offer to go out, but he kept coming back, finding reasons to talk to me. My coworkers thought it was sweet and encouraged me to give him a chance. Eventually, I decided to see where things would go, and the rest is history. Van is wonderful, sweet, kind, mature, financially stable, and he plans all our dates. The only issue I have is with his mother, Naomi. Now, before you judge me, I want to clarify that I used to like Naomi when I first met her. Van was just 13 when his parents divorced. His father, Matt, had cheated with a coworker, which devastated Naomi, especially since they were college sweethearts. Matt begged for forgiveness, claiming he had never been with anyone else and had made a stupid mistake, losing himself in the process. Naomi, however, filed for divorce. While Matt's actions were awful, Van was too young to fully understand and was heartbroken by the split. He spent weekdays with Naomi and weekends with Matt. Despite his betrayal, Matt remained a good father, attending Van's sports events and parent-teacher meetings, always supportive and allowing Van to be himself. Naomi, on the other hand, became extremely strict and possessive, perhaps a reaction to Matt's infidelity. Here are some of the restrictions Van shared with me from his childhood. He couldn't stay out late with friends, date, join picnics or class trips, be near water bodies, or have sleepovers. At first, these rules seemed absurd to me, but Van explained that his mother justified them by claiming she was lonely without him and just wanted to protect him from the world. As a result, Van soon preferred staying with his dad, who had none of these strict rules. Matt's only rule was for Van to avoid staying out too late and always share his location when out with friends, just in case of an emergency. When class trips came up, Naomi would forbid Van from joining, but Matt would sign him up and encourage him to go. This often led to fierce arguments between Naomi and Matt, with Naomi even threatening to take Matt to court. If Van wanted to go out with friends, his mother would refuse, so he'd wait for weekends with his dad to attend concerts or eat out. As Van grew into a teenager, he increasingly disliked living with his mother due to their constant conflicts. Naomi also disapproved of Van's dressing style, hairstyle, and friends. He often spent his days locked in his room, only finding relief on weekends when he could be free with his dad. When Van turned 17, Matt introduced him to his current wife, Heather. Heather, who had faced fertility challenges and had accepted that she could never have children, was a kind and loving presence in Van's life. When she met Matt, she was delighted to discover he had a son, and she quickly became a second maternal figure to Van, who adored her. This development, however, was unacceptable to Naomi. She couldn't accept another woman in her son's life and frequently clashed with Van about it. Naomi would try to sway Van by suggesting that his dad was likely cheating on her with Heather and that he shouldn't accept his dad's second marriage. This was false, as Heather came into Matt's life only after his divorce and when he was living alone. Nevertheless, Naomi refused to accept this and made Matt's life difficult by obstructing his visits with Van. Van eagerly awaited the weekends, but Naomi would tell him he couldn't see his dad, questioning Heather's character and insisting that he couldn't live with strangers. This caused numerous bitter disputes between Matt and Naomi, as she steadfastly refused to compromise. When Van turned 18, he became an adult and was accepted into 2 universities. His mother pressured him to choose the one nearby so she could drive to see him every weekend. He didn't like that university as it lacked the resources for his field of interest, and he discussed it honestly with his dad. Matt encouraged him to make his own decision, regardless of his mother's wishes, but Van was afraid of upsetting her. Ultimately, he chose the university farther away, which triggered another outburst from Naomi. She yelled at him, accusing him of abandoning her and making sweeping generalizations about men. She threatened to kick him out and refused to pay for his college fees unless he chose the university she wanted. Desperate, Van called his dad for help, and Matt immediately drove over to assist with packing Van's things so he could move in with him. Van recounted how Naomi hurled vile insults at him and his dad, the last thing he saw before they left. Van attended his chosen university, and Matt assured him he would cover as much of the fees as he could. For the rest, Van would take a manageable student loan to cover the costs. When Van went away to college, he stopped contacting or visiting his mother. She sent him a daily barrage of texts, alternating between apologies and blaming him for ruining her life. Van admitted he missed his mom a lot but didn't want to deal with her again. Matt stayed in regular contact with Van, and they met up during the holidays. In his second year of college, Van received a call from the hospital informing him that his mother had attempted to end her life. He immediately called his dad, and they rushed to the hospital. Naomi was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and depression and was admitted for 72 hours of supervision. This was a pivotal moment for Van. He broke down, blaming himself for his mother's actions. He told me how he sat by her bedside, asking for her forgiveness and praying for her recovery. Upon her discharge, Naomi was prescribed medication to manage her condition. Van promised his mother he would never leave her again and maintained constant contact with her. After college, he decided to move back to his hometown to be near her. He had his own place but was always just a phone call away in case she needed him, which she has often taken full advantage of. Since the incident, Van has lived in a state of anxiety and guilt regarding his mother. He believes she is extremely fragile and feels compelled to heed her every word, even when he doesn't want to. When Van confided in me about all this, I was sympathetic and understanding. His mother had been attending regular checkups and therapy sessions, so I assumed she was improving. When I met his mother for the first time, she appeared sweet but would make subtly off-putting comments about my height, color, or weight, such as suggesting I should lose more weight to keep Van happy or remarking that Van was fairer than me, so hopefully our baby would be fair too. She would also make remarks about Van, saying things like how our baby boy deserves the best, how he should never be in the kitchen, or how he could do much better than me, but was choosing to settle. Naomi's comments would occasionally bother me, but I tried not to take them to heart, letting her say what she wanted. However, as Van and I deepened our relationship, I noticed how his mother's emotional struggles were increasingly affecting him. She would call him every morning to ask if he had eaten a good breakfast, and if he missed her call, she would call repeatedly until he answered. When I moved in with Van, she even called me to ask why he wasn't picking up and to accuse me of keeping him away from her. Van often canceled plans or left events abruptly, saying his mother needed him because she was feeling unwell. When he received an award at work, he had to take his mother as his +1 instead of me, or she would throw a fit whenever we planned a vacation. She insisted he share his location with her, claiming it helped her sleep better at night. All of this made me uncomfortable. I could also sense Van's internal conflict between his desire for a normal life and his obligation to his troubled mother. He didn't want to fulfill all her demands, but he feared she might do something drastic if he didn't. In contrast to his mother, Matt, Van's dad, was incredibly easygoing. I had met Matt and his wife, Heather, several times, and they were always welcoming and never asked intrusive questions. Matt was genuinely interested in me and treated me with respect, which made me see some of the good qualities in both Matt and Van. This is part of why I stayed by Van's side. I saw that he was so much more than what his mother had made him believe. I knew he needed therapy and encouraged him to talk more, though he always insisted he was okay. When Van proposed to me, it was a complete surprise and one of the happiest moments of my life. He had flown in my parents and my best friend as a surprise to celebrate with us. Matt and Heather were there, congratulating us warmly. The only person missing was Naomi, and Van explained that she wasn't feeling well. I was actually relieved she wasn't there, as I feared she might say something awkward in front of my parents, who might not have taken kindly to her. We were all enjoying the celebration when Van received a call from the hospital, informing him that his mother had fallen down the stairs. We all rushed to be there for her, but Naomi refused to see anyone except Van. She insisted that only he be allowed in her room, so the rest of us had to wait outside. I found it a bit strange that Naomi didn't want anyone but Van with her, but I decided it wasn't the right moment to say anything. When Van came out, he reassured us that she was going to be okay. She had a fracture and would need to stay overnight. Naomi wanted Van to stay with her. Matt suggested that he stay with Naomi since she would mostly be asleep, and he encouraged Van to take me back home. However, Van refused, worried that Naomi wouldn't approve, and didn't want to upset my parents. We eventually returned home, and my parents and best friend helped me tidy up. Van had booked hotel rooms for them, but they chose to stay with me, likely sensing that I was disappointed about not spending the night with Van after his proposal. Looking back, I realized this should have been my first sign that things were heading downhill. After that, Naomi's preferences began to overshadow our wedding preparations. She wanted to dictate everything from the wedding dress I should wear to the choice of our flower girl, Van's suit, the guest list, the venue, and nearly every other detail. When it came to our honeymoon, Van and I had always planned to go to Hawaii, but Naomi insisted we shouldn't fly so far and suggested a closer destination instead. That's when I decided to stand my ground and told her no. Naomi was taken aback and accused me of being disrespectful. I firmly told her that the honeymoon was about Van and me, so we would decide where we wanted to go. She started crying and accused me of excluding, ignoring, and pushing her away. She claimed I was trying to keep her from her son, which I found absurd. I pointed out that I had accommodated her her venue choice, her cake idea, and even the dresses for my bridesmaids, so I was doing my best to be considerate, but I wouldn't let her force us to choose a honeymoon destination we didn't want. Van, caught between his duty to his mother and his commitment to our wedding, attempted to reason with her, but she portrayed herself as a martyr sacrificing for her son. Later, I sent Naomi a text apologizing, knowing how important she was to Van, but her response was that no woman could take her son away from her and that I should learn my place. I showed the message to Van, who called his mother for clarification. She accused me of trying to sow discord in their relationship and insisted that he should always love and believe her more than me. I found this extremely uncomfortable, so I pointed it out to Van after his call, and to my relief, he agreed. He reassured me that we would stick to our original plan and go to Hawaii, as we had decided. This brought me immense happiness, as it seemed Van was finally standing up to his mother, and we could have our honeymoon away from her interference. The wedding went smoothly without any major incidents, but during the reception, Naomi gave a lengthy speech about herself, highlighting her sacrifices in life. It felt like a subtle attempt to redirect attention back to her, even on our special day. Despite this, I focused on the positive aspects and the excitement of our upcoming honeymoon in Hawaii. My parents, Matt, Heather, and the rest of the guests had a wonderful time at our wedding, and we danced the night away. On the day of our honeymoon, I woke up with excitement. Van and I got ready for the airport, and I was filled with joy. However, when we arrived at the airport, I discovered that Van had booked himself a business class seat while I was in economy. I was taken aback, as I would have gladly paid for business class. Van had insisted on planning the entire trip, so I assumed he would book our seats next to each other. When I questioned him, he said he had gotten a last-minute deal and decided to upgrade his ticket, but couldn't find an empty business class seat for me. His evasive demeanor made me feel suspicious. He downplayed it, saying it wasn't a big deal and that it was just a matter of a few hours. I suggested that if it wasn't such a big deal, he could fly economy and I could take the business class seat, since he didn't seem to think it mattered. Van became angry and insisted that I was being too sensitive, then said he would meet me later after the flight. I asked Van where he was going, and he said he was heading to the business class lounge. Confused and hurt, I struggled to understand why he had booked us with such different seating arrangements. My attempts to talk to him were met with a cold demeanor, leaving me to wait alone for our flight. I felt on the verge of tears but didn't want to start our honeymoon in such a state, so I went to the restroom to freshen up and then sat in the waiting area until it was time to board. I called Van several times, but he didn't answer, which only deepened my suspicion. My gut told me something wasn't right. Then, unexpectedly, Naomi called me. She rarely contacted me unless she needed to reach Van. I answered and intended to let her know that Van would call her back soon. Instead, Naomi began asking where I was, which struck me as odd, since she could have easily guessed I was at the airport. I told her I was waiting for my flight, but she pressed on with specific questions about whether I was near a particular cafe or lounge. I was already frustrated with Van's actions and had no patience for Naomi's manipulations, so I bluntly asked her what she wanted. Naomi hesitated, then, in her usual taunting tone, said I shouldn't lose my cool but that she was coming on our honeymoon too. I lost it at that point and shouted, asking if she was joking. Naomi explained that she just wanted to be close to Van and didn't want him to fly so far away, so she had convinced him to let her join us. I was so furious that I abruptly ended the call and made my way to the business class lounge. The security at the lounge was reluctant to let me in, but I told them my husband was inside, and I needed to speak to him urgently about his mother, who wasn't picking up my calls. After much persuasion, they allowed me in. I was shocked to find Van sitting there, scrolling through his phone, which meant he had his phone with him the entire time, and had been deliberately ignoring my calls. I walked up to him, and he looked up in surprise. He asked if something was wrong, but I demanded to know if it was true that Naomi was coming on our honeymoon. Van sat there, frozen in shock. I asked him if this was why he had booked a separate ticket for me, to keep me from finding out that he was flying on our honeymoon with his mother. Van's face flushed red as people around us started to stare and whisper. Even the security guard seemed to get caught up in our argument. At that moment, Naomi walked into the lounge, her eyes darting around, likely searching for Van. When she saw us, she froze. I told Van that Naomi had called me to inform me about his plans. Van tried to explain that he had initially booked tickets for us in economy, but Naomi had kept crying and pleading with him. In an attempt to keep both of us happy, he had decided to book separate tickets so I wouldn't find out. He mentioned that he had even booked a completely different hotel for Naomi so she wouldn't bother us. Mill approached us and, as usual, tried to intervene. She told me I should be grateful that her son loved her so much and that it wasn't a big deal for her to come along, as she had never been so far from him. I was losing control, and if we weren't at the airport, I would have lashed out at her. Instead, I had to keep my composure and shouted at Van, saying I was embarrassed to be marrying a man who couldn't go anywhere without his mother tagging along, and that he seemed more like her husband than her son. Van started whispering, accusing me of trying to embarrass him in front of affluent people and suggesting we could discuss this later in Hawaii. I laughed in his face and told him he could enjoy his honeymoon with his mommy because I was done with the marriage. Mill and Van looked at me, wide-eyed in shock, as I walked away. I tore my tickets in half and booked a cab home. Eventually, Van also decided not to go and rushed back, berating me for how I had no right to speak to him that way and for doing what he thought was right. He mentioned that Mill had to fly out alone since she didn't want to waste her ticket. I locked myself in the bathroom to cry, unable to bear seeing his face. This all happened yesterday, and I've been in a daze since then. It's clear to me that our marriage is over because Van isn't asking for forgiveness or even talking to me, which really hurts. Just 3 days ago, I was looking forward to spending the rest of my life with him, so walking out of this marriage is a huge deal. That's why I'm here on Reddit, asking ATA for leaving my husband after he wanted to bring his mother on our honeymoon. Update 1. Wow, thank you all so much for the hundreds of comments and DMs I've received. When I wrote this, I didn't expect so many internet strangers to reach out with comforting words. I've read through all your comments and I agree with some of you that I need to have one last discussion with Van about this. If he continues to support his mother, I will have no choice but to end our marriage as I can't keep fighting about this for the rest of my life. Naomi clearly doesn't care about us as she had the audacity to fly to Hawaii alone. I will update you once we have that discussion. Update 2. It's been a month since my last update and a lot has happened. After receiving so many supportive messages and reflecting on the situation, I decided I needed to take decisive action. The tension had become too overwhelming, and I couldn't let it go unresolved. So I packed my bags, determined to have a serious conversation with Van when he got home from work. This discussion could either mend our marriage or end it for good. When Van walked through the door and saw me waiting, a mix of surprise and concern crossed his face. I asked him to sit down and offered him a glass of water. The air was thick with tension. We hadn't spoken since the incident, and he still seemed to think I owed him an apology. Taking a deep breath, I decided to lay everything on the table. I shared how his mother's behavior had affected me from the beginning of our relationship. I described how I noticed his change in demeanor when she was around, how he seemed to morph into a different person. I acknowledged the guilt he carried because of his mother's past, the sacrifices she claimed to have made for him, and how it had slowly eroded the foundation we had built together. Tears filled my eyes as I shared how difficult Naomi's constant interference had made my life, not just with our wedding but also with our honeymoon. I poured out my heart, explaining that I had fallen in love with him for his kindness and sweetness, but his mother's presence was steadily eroding what we had. I cried as I revealed the emotional toll it had taken on me. When I finished, I saw that Van's face was also streaked with tears. I was stunned to see him break down. He began to speak, his voice choked with emotion, and confessed that he had no idea I had been feeling this way throughout our relationship. He admitted that he had always been accustomed to taking care of his mother, living in constant fear that something terrible might happen to her. His tears flowed freely as he shared the internal struggle he had been battling. He explained how he had become so conditioned to prioritizing her needs above everyone else's that he didn't know how to break free from it. He told me he knew bringing his mother on the honeymoon was wrong, but she had guilt-tripped him, and he had given in, thinking it was the best way to keep her happy. I told him that if his mother truly wanted to be close to him, she wouldn't have traveled to Hawaii and left him behind. He nodded, acknowledging that he had been blind to her manipulations until now. The weight of his emotions was evident as he dropped to his knees, repeatedly apologizing. This moment broke my heart, and I hugged him, feeling the immense suffering he had endured. It was clear that he needed counseling, and if he was willing to work on his issues, I was ready to fight for our marriage. Over the next 2 weeks, Van made an appointment with a therapist and began attending sessions. He also had a deeply emotional conversation with his dad, who was unaware of the extent of Naomi's influence. Matt was shocked by the situation and echoed my sentiments, advising Van that it was time to stop prioritizing his mother's needs and start living his life for himself. With his therapist's guidance, Van decided to go low contact with his mother, recognizing the need for space to heal and clarify his thoughts. However, this decision is proving to be extremely challenging because Naomi continues to call him frequently. He hasn't yet informed her about his therapy sessions, and he fears she will react strongly when she finds out. He plans to tell her this weekend that he needs space, and if she doesn't accept it, he may have to resort to blocking her. Overall, this feels like a crucial step toward healing our relationship. While I know the road ahead will be difficult, it's the first time it seems like we're truly heading in the right direction. Update 3 It's been 3 months since my last update, and I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to everyone who has been following my story and offering support. It's been a tumultuous journey, and your encouragement has meant the world to me. After his conversation with the therapist, Van had a difficult discussion with his mother. Unsurprisingly, it didn't go well. She unleashed a torrent of accusations, screaming and blaming me for driving a wedge between them. She even demanded that Van divorce me, claiming that our relationship had ruined their bond and that they were happier before I came into the picture. However, Van stood his ground. He told her unequivocally that he would no longer tolerate her manipulative behavior and insisted that she respect our relationship and boundaries. Following this ultimatum, Van took the decisive step of blocking her on his phone, and I did the same. This was essential for our peace of mind and the health of our relationship. Predictably, Naomi started spreading stories about being abandoned by her son, painting herself as the victim. The gossip reached us through various acquaintances and family members, but we chose to stay focused on our own happiness. During this period, Matt, Van's dad, has been incredibly supportive. He has made sure to check in on Naomi, ensuring she was taking her medication and managing well. Since we cut ties with Naomi, Van has noticed a significant improvement in his emotional well-being. The persistent cloud of anxiety and guilt that once hung over him has dissipated. We have been able to enjoy date nights without the incessant interruptions from her calls, allowing us to truly cherish our time together. As for our honeymoon, Van wanted to make things right and surprised me with a trip to Hawaii. This time we both flew business class together, finally enjoying the peaceful and romantic getaway we had originally planned. The vacation was incredible, allowing us to deepen our bond and create beautiful memories together. Overall, I feel a strong sense of happiness and optimism for our future. Despite the challenges we've faced, Van's growth and commitment to our relationship have been clear. If there are any further developments, I'll be sure to keep you all updated.